Janet, how are you?
Danny, I'm good.
I am really excited about this podcast episode. I know I say that every time, but this podcast, the theme is abolition. And you know, that's something that's very important to me. In this podcast, we interview Benjamin Lundberg Torres Sánchez, artist and facilitator.
I learned so much thinking about the terms abolitionist, thinking about the terms that were associated or are associated with adoption and relating that to my experience within the United States as a Black woman. This interview touched on so many things, and we were able to just have this open space where Benjamin shared with us without hesitation. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, this is definitely going to resonate with so many people and help so many people.
Yeah, it super humbled me. I learned a lot from this, which I wasn't expecting to learn as much as I did, I guess. I thought coming into this, I'm going to be like, oh, I know all about this topic in comparison to like other interviews we've done. But they super expanded my frameworks, my notions of abolition. But yeah, language in particular, I feel like we always talk about language and about the importance of words.
Yes. Yes.
But this one in particular, there's even for me, quite a big turning point towards the end of the podcast where I'm like, ooh, here's a term I've been using for years. And I'm like, I don't even know if I want to use that term anymore, you know?
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm really, I'm trying not to do any spoiler alerts.
Don't say anything. So with that said, we could just go ahead and get right into it.
Let's do it.
All right.
Hi, thanks for joining us on Reflect, Recalibrate. Woo woo. We're so happy you're here. Remember to tell your friends, your family, and your foes, yes, your foes, that they too can learn about artivists and artivism by subscribing to RFC anywhere they listen to podcasts. They can also watch and subscribe on YouTube at Reflect Calibrate the Podcast. Well, I think that's that. Now let's get into it.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate you having me on.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. Yeah. I have lots of questions just about where you are, what you're wearing, Benjamin, and maybe even talk about why are you here? How did you get here? The who, what, when, where, how, why.
Sure. Thank you so much, Danny. I'll start. I'm a light-skinned person with dark hair and dark eyes, wearing a handkerchief with a pattern of like hand-drawn eyes as a bandage or compress over my right eye. I'm wearing a bright green sweater and mismatched gold earrings by my friend Elena Soledad, who is the creator of Brooklyn Warmy Designs. I'm here as an uninvited settler on unceded Ohlone and Ramaytush lands occupied by San Francisco, California. My space is pretty neutral wall with a piece of framed art behind me. And I'm here to talk about work that I'm doing that's bringing together community that is variously impacted by related systems of what I would call family regulation. But like two examples of those that maybe are clarifying are adoption and foster care. But creating sort of like a commons or a place for people to share their creative expressions about their experiences of these systems, and also to find each other, because we are often in very disparate community with each other. So yeah, that's what my focus or my passion or work is about right now.
Great. Awesome. I'm saying great and awesome because I'm really excited because I'm an abolitionist and I know there's going to be some really good stuff we're going to talk about today. Some really
cool, yeah, important
stuff, I should say. Yeah. But before we get into that, Janet, we should introduce ourselves too. Janet, who are you? Where are you? What are you wearing?
Well, I am Janet, as you can see on screen. If you're not looking at the screen or if you're listening, Janet E. Dandridge is what I go by. And I am a dark-skinned woman with a short afro, colored blonde. I have on a multicolor African style necklace and a black tank top. I am sitting in front of a wall of, or bookshelf of records. And also I am wearing earrings that I purchased at the Perez Museum in Miami. And also the necklace that I mentioned is from a woman, Adeline from Burkina Faso. And I do support her often. I wear a lot of her stuff. So
I am a white cisgender woman. I am in my office studio. So behind me, I have my drum set and a bunch of art from different people that I've worked with and other artists who I love and adore and collect their work. A bunch of like little postcard size images on my wall. And I have long brownish blondish hair, some big Princess Leia-like headphones on, big hoop earrings. And I was fancy today and wore eyeliner. So yeah. That's where I'm at.
You're always fancy.
For the podcast, I'm fancy. So like once a month.
You fancy. Oh my gosh. I totally forgot one person. I'm sorry. Can I add this in?
The glasses?
The glasses. Yes.
I was gonna come back to you about the glasses. Yeah.
The glasses.
Those are the most fab thing you're wearing. Yeah. You have to talk about that.
Oh my gosh. June Mines in Washington, D.C. has a boutique shop, These Eyes of Mines. And they are silver frames, round frames with an asymmetrical line in the middle instead of a straight line going across the nose bridge.
Great. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to ask, Ben. Your cup looks very interesting. You're drinking from, is it coffee or it looks like almost like a
tea right now. This is like, I don't know the designer, but this is porcelain from Wing On Wo, which is the oldest storefront in Manhattan, Chinatown. 5 generations of people have run the storefront, and my friend Mei Lum, who's the current owner, also started an arts and activism and organizing project at the storefront for community to like sustain the space. That's called the WOW Project. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right on. Yeah, the cup almost looked like an iceberg or something.
Yeah,
and it's like, what an interesting shape.
All of us are awesome, cool, supporting artists and people that we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is great.
I think y'all are doing better than me today. I was boring and I'm wearing hoop earrings and I'm admittedly drinking from a Starbucks coffee cup. I'm not proud of it. It has a really cool elephant on it and I'm obsessed with elephants. So everyone always buys me things with elephants on it, even if it's from Starbucks, which I don't necessarily endorse.
Ethical consumption under capitalism. Right.
I mean, right?
Can we jump right on into the project, Janet?
Yeah, let's do this. Tell us about We Are Holding This.
Yeah, so We Are Holding This is like an evolution of something that started as a total experiment that emerged from some pandemic feels, and also like the beauty of being able to meet people across great distances online, which we already have access to, but maybe was, made just like brought to the forefront of so many people's experiences over these last couple of years. I reached out to another artist who was also separated from their first family through the adoption system after I saw their work in an online exhibition in 2020. That person's name is Leah Nichols, and Leah is my co-founder and co-editor of a zine project called You Are Holding This. And we were thinking about a couple of things, like sort of like the commodification of art and information on Instagram that kind of like inherits a lot of what you might see in a corporate meeting or a nonprofit meeting of like just pithy, digestible slides of information that are very directive and tell people what to do. Not a lot, and also like just the emergence of influencer cultures across lots of different, issue areas. So that also is a part of our landscape as adopted, fostered, and trafficked people. There's a lot of sort of like individual output of information from some really, really smart and creative people, but done, kind of piecemeal. And I think that if isolation and separation are some of the core violences of systems that seek to regulate or surveil or police families, that Leah and I really wanted to connect with people in a way that felt, well, like engaging the sense of touch, just being able to receive something in the mail, know that it came from specific humans out there, and that the page itself, so this zine acts as kind of like a poster on one side and then a collection of work on the reverse side. We wanted people to be able to hold something in their hands. We wanted people to be able to display it in their space if they wished. But also the medium of it as a single piece of newsprint is very, very delicate. And so I think like all of these things came together behind that creative impulse. Yeah, we just really wanted to have something that people could hold in their hands, and that acted as a portal out to other impacted people's lives, stories, work, creative expressions, and thematically are centered on abolition of these systems, but then also connecting to other movements for liberation and justice and abolition as well. Because I think like so many people who have experiences that get siloed in a specific kind of like issue or identity often are influenced to kind of like remain in that silo. And so like there are so many of us who like work on other things, you know, so we want to be able to create inter-movement connection and weave those things together as people who are directly impacted by a system that has impacted our families primarily. So I'll just tack on that we are holding this now as like a media distribution hub that will continue to bring people to zine, but also other projects. So we're working with individual artists, we're working with collectives, and also spin-off projects from the zine. So what we're hoping is that independent publishing will be an avenue for people to, yes, get information about this in the way that this can be political education, but also like primarily a social space that lives on the page.
I heard you bring up the term family regulation, and I wanted you to describe to us more what that means for people who may not understand what that phrase actually means.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough because there's a lot of language that comes from within community that, you know, like we don't always all agree on terms, but I use family regulation systems as the largest umbrella for practices that, yeah, are about controlling and shaping families and other systems of kinship towards a kind of like one size fits all reality. I think that, for instance, in the US, if you think about the histories of where child welfare or adoption emerged from, which are the control of Indigenous people and the theft of their land, you know, the theft of African people and the commodification of their bodies and labor and family members, and the like direct practices of separating family members from each other for profit, and also the way that immigrant families in the US were controlled or seen as unfit, and their children were taken to be free or cheap labor for aging Midwestern people in more rural contexts. You can see that the state, like our state, the US, and many others have had a vested interest in kind of like controlling the contours of family and also reproduction of groups that they have historically seen as problems. So when I talk about family regulation, we're talking about the way that both state and private industry come together to sort of shape family towards, you know, like all the isms along lines of like cis heteronormativity, so patriarchy, in capitalist ways, like influencing people to have like small nuclear families that are isolated from community, in ableist ways, in Christian supremacist ways, in white supremacist ways. And so we can see that both the way that children and families are commodified under capitalism, and also the way that the state is trying to regulate certain types of people and their communities out of existence. All of these things converge in systems like child protective services or adoption. And that's specifically what I'm referring to. Yeah.
The thing that stuck out to me first, a lot of things stuck out to me, but is how you said that story works. And I would like to go back to that comment of, how do you know story works? Or maybe how have you seen story works? Like, why is story so important in what you're doing? And maybe just in like activism in general. Something I'm also thinking about is the artist Kate DeCiccio. She's a mural artist and she does a bunch of stuff. And one thing that she told me once was how she felt like the prison industrial complex was like the backdrop to America. And I hadn't really thought about this complex as the backdrop to America as well. And how all stories, like all facets of our lives, weave into it, whether we know it, like, or not, whether it's conscious or not. So yeah, I'm just, those are the things I'm thinking about right now. But can you maybe elaborate a little bit on just story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like it's so critical always to be thinking about, how does my individualized story connect to something collective? And then maybe within, I know that, like, for instance, if I say I am adopted, that connects me to other people who have experienced family separation through adoption. And all of our stories could weave together. But so too could I weave my story with you know, a directly impacted parent organizer who is trying to, you know, halt the state from forcibly removing their children from their home. It could connect me to families who are experiencing family separation at borders. My story could connect to like people's stories of dispossession of land, or from having themselves or family members or ancestors stolen and forcibly displaced or removed from homeland. So I think like there are so many like really important reasons why people, I think, must be telling their stories, but also I think in ways that invite collectivity and invite relationship and connection between stories. So I think like, to me, I've received a lot of like creative education that suggests something about universality or like wide appeal. And I think like more so, I'm really excited and curious about the connective piece, like, and how we can still have a lot of plurality while seeking out what are the connections between very different experiences of related harms.
That sounds like the intersectionality that, oh my goodness, Kimberly Crenshaw, I believe, is the person who, you know, formulated that idea. And from what you just said about how you can present yourself, the label, this one label that can connect so many different ways, I don't think I had thought about how foster adoption connects to my feeling of loneliness, displacement, being unaware of my histories as a person labeled Black in the United States of America, whose ancestors were forcibly brought here, and who also, some may not have been forcibly brought here, but just not knowing. So thinking about that and thinking about how you said these connections, I had never actually put that together, thinking about, you know, fostered people, adopted people, and how that actually can, you know, connect. And there's this intersection there. And thinking about how, you know, trauma is like this ball in the center. And there's so many pieces that are pulled from this little ball that, you know, it's like we can all connect. Just with the example of trauma, there's other spaces, obviously, joy, you know, from the extremes that we can connect with because of these experiences. So, you know, thank you for just bringing that into my brain. I understand connecting in, you know, other ways with other people, groups of people who label themselves, you know, in different ways, but had never, you know, put that together, you know. So, you know, I definitely appreciate that.
I'd also say, Janet, I really appreciate just receiving that reflection from you. And it's just like really amazing feedback to just in this moment, like see how you are meeting me in that. And I think like so much of that is also like the like creating space to invite that connection has come out of you know, also just the practice of a lot of us experimenting with trying to be extremely explicit about the processes and actors that have impacted our lives. So rather than saying I was adopted, which I rarely do anymore, I say something along the lines of I was separated from my first family in Colombia for 28 years through a private transnational adoption process that was administered by lawyers and social workers who, prior to my removal, coerced my mom into terminating her parental rights, which like is a really different like mode of storytelling than flattening it into like I am adopted, I was adopted. So I think like it also invites like many other points of connection. Like of course like our stories are different, but there will be more entry points for folks to like say that something that you said is a part of my story too, or a part of someone that I care deeply about story as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. You know, you mentioned one label, and I know what you just said also about not conflating and actually expanding by sharing and being open and giving, you know, those details. You know, we don't always want to share. However, I'm wondering, you know, you did share a bit about your story of adoption. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with us and our audience that might continue to open and expand that space?
Sure. I mean, I think I'll just go for something that like is like a new revelation for me, because, you know, I'm connecting with first family across like my own processes of like reclaiming language. And so, you know, there's always, I mean, even with my like white US American family, like it bears asking for stories to be told and retold over, because I always get new details. You know, it's depending on the time and place that I'm asking. And so, but I think like something that is I'm really thinking about in my Colombian family and my first family are two major details of this story. One, that my mom is in a process of you know, healing her own family separation, because she and her siblings were basically like pushed out of the extended family after my grandparents died. So, you know, they experienced their own processes of abandonment and estrangement from family, losing like stability in housing, and just needing to be a unit as siblings together. So just witnessing my mom's own like reclamation processes and like trying to get, you know, reclaim her connections with family members is like just highlights to me how this is intergenerational, and also like that it's not often that family members are doing like the abandoning, like we're abandoned first by the state. And I'm taking the idea from Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who talks about organized abandonment. So I think like that's a really important concept to like just hold close and spend time with. And then the other dimension of my story is that like my first father is also my uncle. He was the partner of my aunt, so my mom's brother-in-law. And so I came into being through assault, through rape. And so this also like is the most personal like foregrounding of like my abolitionist like just how I'm trying to like be in practice and live out abolition, is that I do, like my father was murdered a few years after I was born, just through like gun violence at a place that he worked. But I also like don't think that we should have, like where he's living, that he should be abandoned to an institution like prison. I do think that he should account for his harm. But I also don't think that like we can warehouse people in places like prisons or mental health facilities or even like elder care, you know, like, so I think like these two things are like really at the forefront of a lot of like my own experience of my story, as it touches both like how do we organize with people across like various experiences, and also like really hold close an ethic of like nobody is disposable and nobody is abandoned.
Wow. I mean, that just sharing that with us is, you know, I mean, it's, I am thinking about your mother and her healing and continued healing. And I'm thinking also about what you said about your father not being put into that system, because that's not necessarily the prison or an asylum, because that's not necessarily, I'm paraphrasing you, you know, the path that we should take.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard line because I think like there's a really amazing writing that the person who runs Abolish Time, who also publishes their work in print, just put out about like the idea that like a lot of abolitionist thinking and practice has been co-opted by this sense that like there should, if we can't find an immediate sort of like community consequence for somebody's harmful actions, that we're just sort of like, okay, I don't know what to do. I don't want to be carceral, or like I don't want my actions being related to like the practices of like policing and imprisoning people. And so we just throw up our hands and say like, I guess there's no consequences for this behavior. And so I want to be like really, really, really clear that like my idea is not to be an apologist for my first father's violence. It's more so that like I'm like deeply interested in starting with my mom and my aunt in understanding like what they desire, and also listening to their story of what they think about healing and forgiveness, which is not excusing. And I think like maybe the way that ripples out across generations for me is that even though like I'm you know, a non-binary like fluid person, like I feel best positioned in my Colombian family to like call masculine people into conversation about like the patriarchal context of like our family and of Colombian culture at large. So I think like the consequence has to be taken up somewhere, I think. And I hope that we can do that through the collectivity of our extended family and how that like ripples outward. But you know, there are like some young folks like coming up right now in my family, and I feel like it's extremely important for us to just be talking directly about who you know, my first father is and was in no uncertain terms, and to have like a reckoning with that as a part of like our shared story. Yeah, so I think like so like no apologism, and we're not talking about a world free of consequence, but I do think that like those consequences are going like would emerge from those who have experienced harm and like be geared towards like their healing and thriving primarily.
Yeah.
And that sometimes can look like saying like, I need you to leave my community, or like, you know, some these really hard lines that I think sometimes people like position as like related to policing or imprisoning or building a border out and like excluding people. But I think like that is still, I think the violence that we experience in like these institutions like comes from trying to meet experience like through just a like really kind of like regimented like way. Like it always, like this action always has this consequence, and not like seeking plurality and like really listening to people. So yeah, thanks for giving me time to just expand on that, because I think it's something that like I'm trying to like bring clarity to right now in this moment of speaking with y'all, but also don't have an absolute answer, and I'm still learning so much about like what that should look like and how to practice it.
Danny, real quick, because it's something literally I wrote that is
no, go ahead.
Follow up to that. First of all, Ben, you mentioned so many different things, like organized abandonment, the abolished Times newspaper, talking about Colombian culture at large, and then just going back to the healing in families and how do we move forward with healing if we don't talk about what has happened, right? And if we aren't explicit with that, that's base therapy. You know, you have to communicate and converse about what it is that's happening before being able to truly, you know, move forward. And maybe I shouldn't even use the word truly, but move forward. And I had a question, you know, speaking to what you said about it being formulated right now, your answer regarding, you know, these hard lines and what to do, because that was something I was thinking about. And I'm going to read my question. I was saying, people may ask if there aren't agencies to facilitate and regulate, right, adoption and fostering, what would you suggest to replace that? And what would that oversight look like? And I think you touched on that at the very end, you know, thinking about, well, yeah, what is it? You know, what would we have if we don't have that? If we don't to utilize these agencies that have been put in place, you know, for a long period of time, that can kind of be quote unquote unbiased, as some people say, which that's not true.
Yeah, huge question, and also like a common question. I think that first I want to say that like a lot of I'll just say like abolitionists, whether you're talking about the abolition of prisons and police, or you're talking about family regulation systems like adoption and foster care, are often tasked immediately with like providing the like solution or answer, which I think like we are like passionately working on. And also like humans are just, you know, out in our world noticing things that like are wrong or off or like undesirable in some way, and we don't always task that noticing with providing solutions. So I think like it's really vital that we continue to be able to notice harm without needing to always be tasked with providing the solution. That said, I think that there's also the question, I think, is earnest as you ask it and as many others do, and also like grounded in some like, it's hard to not misunderstand the system when when there's such a like dedicated misinformation campaign around what adoption and foster care is. And so I think like, speaking of foster care, folks immediately think about abuse. And I think like we will always live in a world where harm happens. And so I think like that's a hard thing for people to hold as a reality. So that's one piece of it. I think that the majority of children who are in the foster care system are not experiencing abuse. They're experiencing what is termed as neglect, which is usually the symptoms of poverty. and furthermore, usually assessed under some really classist, ableist, and racist metrics that are just deeply, deeply embedded in social work and law and policy. So I think like that's one thing that is a big struggle for me is like, I just finished an artivism fellowship with Broadway Advocacy Coalition, and there was such a extreme emphasis on policy. And there was not a lot of room to, of course, like policy can mean something other than law, but there was like not a lot of space to discuss just even the notion that maybe like the law is not for us. It has not been like the criminal legal system has not been like designed to serve like most people. And so I think like so much of this like emerges from like, yeah, the protection of like wealthy people's interests and like a certain kind of like cultural maintenance that is like, yeah, emerges from all the isms we talked about before. So what to do, I think, is just like a piecemeal example is like there was an activist judge in Louisiana who maybe you can throw up her name in post, I'll find it for you, who like just made it her mission before she retired to throw out as many cases as she could in family court that didn't meet rigorous standards of like best efforts to reunify children with their families. And that's one person like taking it upon themselves to do that. Like we actually can't like rely on that kind of saviorism from people. But I think like speaking again of plurality, there's so much kind of like kinship, familial, community technology that has been suppressed by dominant culture. And so like we can look at so many people's ancestors and ancestral ways and say like, this is a way that we can deal with harm in a family unit, within kinship, within our community. You know, I think like because of capitalism and the privatization of family and community, something that like I'm trying to like very slowly learn about how family has been constructed historically and influenced into a different shape through capitalism. I think like there are so many ways that people took care of each other and had responsibility over more people than just like your immediate, what I think a lot of people think of as their immediate family. That holds a lot of the answer to this, you know? And I think like we can see in real time, like there was a case of a tribal community in British Columbia who successfully blocked the removal of children from their tribal land by British Columbian like CPS workers, because they already had an action plan about how to hold harm in community. And so like, you know, we're talking about a mass mobilization of like bodies standing like in front of like social workers trying to remove Indigenous children and saying like, no, this is our plan and we want you to leave, you know? And so I think like just respecting people's like self-determination, like what they know in this moment and across generations, I think all of these things like are really hard for states or as governments as we know it to hold, because of this question that you're asking about oversight and regulation. People are like, what is our standard? And I think like the reality is like there cannot be one standard of care, but that we need to be like sharing really generously all the time, like how are we trying to care for each other? And I think like exchange between like various like cultural ways of doing that is important. I mean, I think like no one group or person has the answer. And so I think like it's just has to continue to churn, but not within like law and policy, and not within like appealing to electeds, not within trying to reform a system that is rotten at its root. I think like the hardest thing for me within community of adopted, foster, and trafficked people, even just like to like narrow it to that, is that I see so many people talk about broken systems. And I think like the most important reframe that I've received from prison abolitionists is like that it's not broken, it's working as intended. I think that frees up like so much like energy and creativity in like my like heart and spirit when I'm not trying to like I saw Mariam Pava refer to it as like not trying to plug up all of the holes in the dam, but I'm working on some other kind of project. Like, so I think like that's why like the zine project, like you're holding this and we are holding this as like an even broader collective space, are geared towards like what is our creative expression, what are we imagining and dreaming about, and it is like in and of itself a like creative generative like building project, and sometimes it hurts my heart to know that like part of like what we have to build right now is just like a way for us to know each other since we're so geographically dispersed, and even like if I were trying to convene something like local to where I am, it's really difficult to find a way of even knowing who's out there. Exactly for the reasons that you described before, like referring to silences, you know? And so I think like one thing that I'm like slowly like making peace with is that like there's huge things to be built like in just how community meets each other that have to proceed or like ground being able to organize ourselves. So that's sort of like how for me this project brings together creative expression and organizing, is like just building the spaces, like the gathering places that we need in order to even just like see and exchange and to be knowing each other.
I was just going to say, for those people who are listening and not watching, Janet and I are doing a lot of head nodding and snapping and like, yes, 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 yes. Everything is really resonating with me. I'm assuming with you too, Janet, if you want to expound. I see you giving a thumbs up.
Yes, 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 and yes. Everything that Ben is sharing with us is, again, just the connections. I think that's an important word for today, is the connections. And I'm just like, what is next, you know, as far as what are we doing right now, and then what is next, because there is always the work to do. And I think that's something that Ben and the collective you are holding this is doing with that zine, you know, making this work that continues, because it's a continuous process. And until we get to this space where it, and I don't even know what to call that space. You know, Ben, you brought up that there's always going to be harm. So I don't even know what to call it. But yes, I
have a question about that, Ben, because a lot of what you're saying to me sounds like restorative justice, but you've purposely not used that phrase. And so now I think my brain is about to explode, because I'm like super, super all about restorative justice. But now I'm like, maybe that's because of the kind of perspective I'm coming in from, you know, because now when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, here is one like system that now we're thinking about applying to everything. And I'm like, that's problematic too. And I didn't really think about that until right now. So yeah, can you talk a little about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think what I'm like still learning about are the ways that transformative and restorative justice, like movements towards those practices have been co-opted in the same way that we're seeing abolition co-opted right now. Like, it's not sexy to refer to like reformist kind of ambition. And so like, especially I would say organizations who are like really don't like have a lot of skin in the game of like really trying to organize people, but are like, I think that our artistry should be related to like something political. And this is the like top shelf language I want to reach for. It's abolitionist, it's restorative justice now. So I think like all of these things, like I'm trying to understand them as like things we're doing or trying to practice. And so like restorative justice seems like a tool to offer a situation, you know, but like with mindfulness that like people involved may not like want to take this pathway. Like I'm seeing something like unfold locally between young people and like I'm still learning how like positions are referred to in government in San Francisco, but like basically like the school board. There was some like racialized comments made by somebody in the school board, racist comments, and a group came together to recommend a restorative justice process initially, but like the most impacted people like ultimately are calling for resignation. So like I think like it was really, really important that restorative justice was like, that people like put it on the table and said like, this is what we think a process like that could look like. And that ultimately folks who were most harmed by this person's comments were like, no, this is what we desire actually. And it is like, the person whose like life or career or work will be impacted by like being called to resign, like, I can't see that as like carceral. Like they're not going to, like, there's so many things that will continue about their life should they step down. But there is a direct consequence for their actions that emerges from communities coming together to discuss what should happen, you know? And so I think like, I think it's down to like really listening to what people want. And I think like that's what's really tough about when like people who have experienced harm reach for for prisons and policing to address that harm. Because like, I don't think that it's also like a good idea to just be like, no, you're wrong, this isn't abolitionist, you know? But like to be in political struggle with each other and to be like, I think maybe it could be done this way. I think it's always making an invitation and proposal and be like, what if we tried this? What if we tried this, you know? And so I don't think like we can throw out any of these tools. And by tools, I mean like transformative restorative justice tools. But yeah, as you said, like maybe not like this is forever and always the thing that we will reach for.
What I'm seeing from the zine and from the work from the hub is as you said, it sounds like the primary objective is about connections, making connections and making a space. And then within that, sharing knowledge, sharing stories, and then also sharing research, and then also collective envisioning. Would you say there are any other objectives with the zine that maybe we're not summarizing here? Any other things that major things that you're trying to do that we haven't discussed?
Yeah.
I think like one small dimension is just like that this is independent, and like we're neither trying to reiterate like a nonprofit, nor are we like, we're not doing academic publishing. So I think like we want what comes to the project to serve community, and that's like an ongoing question. And we want to be able to put out really strong materials that, you know, kind of circumvent the processes of like, you know, big publishing and academia. And so I think like a big piece of this is also like community self-determination, but communities defined broadly, and like creating a space where like maybe that sense of like who is in community with each other like will be ever expanding through who finds it and then decides to kind of like link up with it in some way. Because, you know, we started with a zine, which is like a collective project. And, you know, now we're going to be publishing like individual like poets' work, or like a manifesto that's coming from a collective space, you know, these different kinds of things that can emerge through the frame because people are saying we share vision together. And that might be expressed differently, but we can see this space as a home where this can rest as, you know, one of many places where it may be able to be accessed by people. So I think just folks kind of like throwing in and throwing down, like, and saying like, this is, yeah, of course, take this. We think that this is a part of what you're doing. And I think like just as a practice of like, yeah, just generously sharing with each other in a way that is not bound by a lot of, yeah, ways that things usually get produced, I think is a huge part of it.
I wanted to follow up to what you just said, Ben, about people finding it happenstance. I was thinking about, and I don't know these statistics at all, but children are adopted, children are fostered. So a child who might not come up on this, right? This collectivity and these connections. I was just wondering, how have you all been thinking about how these works can get to them? Because, you know, it's part of that healing process. It's part of them being aware and having an understanding. And also you talked about parent groups as well, but the folks who, you know, aren't in these spaces, or the children who are maybe yearning for something, or they're looking, but they don't know where to find it. Are you linking with, or, you know, just, how are you all doing that? How are you reaching those children?
Thanks for this question, Janet, because like, it's something that is definitely on our hearts and minds, mainly because I think so many of us experience narrativizing of our experiences from our families and other forces that are like external to our own, like trying to process what is and has happened to us. And so that's the situation that we find, you know, children in foster care and in adoptions in. And I think like we already know that there's just a lot of dedicated storytelling that positions adoption and foster care as like benevolent systems that serves the interests of like people who participate in the foster care system and adopting parents and fostering parents, et cetera. And so there's also like a dedicated like power, money, and influence behind like keeping these narratives, critical narratives, away from children. Because it would and will be destabilizing to these systems, and also like ways that people are finding to make kin, like by whatever means necessary. And so I think that one thing that we're working on is that there is an option on the website to sponsor copies of issues of materials, as well as we've just rolled out subscriptions. And like looking at other models like Critical Resistance's like abolitionist newspaper that like really clearly state your subscription is like going to serve this many issues for your own reading and this many copies of this publication for people who are experiencing incarceration right now. And so we're thinking about how both sponsoring copies and also subscribing just to bring some more resource towards the project, so that then we're able to send like 200 copies at a time to a partnering, maybe not even organization, but just like a group of people that we trust who directly work with young people. I think like acknowledging that like we aren't right now, but also recognize this as an issue. And I think like there are a lot of like younger organizers that come out of foster care experiences who are more directly linked to folks who are still inside systems and about to age out. I think like I'm really thinking about like teenagers and yeah, just how we can get this material to them directly, but also like thinking about what is available digitally as well, you know? And I think like a few of the projects that are like coming down the line for We Are Holding This as the hub expands are going to be pay what you wish digital downloads. And so like there is something like really particular, as we talked about before, that we like about having things in print and like embracing the old tradition of zine making, where like you could you know, like pass this along to somebody. And but also yeah, we want to invite deeper accessibility through what is digital, and also through our relationships. Like who else can we be knowing? And knowing like this is somebody who we can trust to steward this like physical resource outward towards younger community members. So it's in process, but we've been yeah, at least trying to get the resources together to do it. And I'm really excited to say that we have like at least a full edition of meaning like over 200 copies sponsored over this last year, starting the project. Thanks. Yeah. So those are here with me in the space, and like we're trying to find homes for them. But it's really, really great also whenever somebody's like, I want to be involved in this project and I want to see what you're doing, and that person's like directly impacted by these systems, we also can just send it to them, because other people have already held down the cost of producing it. So.
Yeah. You know what? We have like two minutes to our hour, and I I feel like this is going to be one of those conversations, what I'm about to mention, that maybe we'll have to invite you back if you have the time for us and have a group conversation. But it's about that artivist statement you wrote. Like, you usually don't rep the term artivist. And so, you know, if just quickly, if you can just give us a quick, you know, summary of why that is, or what's that about.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting that. I'll say shortly that I think like that just instinctually artivism like feels like branding to me. I like try to notice like less like, because I know like individual people just like inherit language from like the spaces that we're in, but I'm trying to like really zero in on like which institutions are using this, like what, you know, like who uses artivism as a term and to what end. And I think that another dimension of this for me is that like I've seen really great activism, really great organizing, and really great artistry in my life. And I feel like often when people are brought together to do artivism, it feels neither like a great art making nor like great organizing. And I think that that has less to do with like the intentions of like artists and organizers who are brought into those spaces, and it has more to do with like other like fucked up inheritances like nonprofit funding and deliverables and things. Like I think that often like people are like, and now produce this product so that we as an institution can claim the thing that you did. Like it feels like colonial display, like same as like DEI, like look at all the different kinds of people we have and what labors they do for us, you know? And so, and also I think that like my interest in, I think I'll like continue to participate in activism, but what I'm really, really hungry to know more about and to be in deeper practice of is organizing. And I think like there's a lot of artists, because like being an artist has a very individualized kind of cachet, like who are influenced to be activists, because that also like appeals to individualism. And I think like I really want what I'm doing to serve organizing. And to me, what that means is serve something that's not very like loud or sexy, but is like slow and plodding and like for like our lifetime, you know? And I think like a lot of activist projects, like to me right now, like I'm only interested in activism that is supporting and emerging from organizing.
Okay. I mean, that's yeah, no, that's it's clarifying, and I think it definitely lends itself to us having an actual series of episodes with the practitioners that we've had on the show, the artivists, the folks who call themselves artists and activists, having a full conversation about that, because I think it leads back to how certain ideas have been taken and commodified because of, and I'll say this quickly, the first that I heard about artivism was from my Chicana friend in Los Angeles, and it came from the Chicano movement. And so for me, I don't see it as something that's sexy because people totally look down on the Chicano movement, you know, the artivists coming out of that. But I also appreciate what you said about, you know, the separation of these things and how when they come together, sometimes these nonprofits, it's about bureaucracy and what can you turn over. So I wanna thank you for that, because I really want to have this conversation. And this is further, because now we're over and my baby's back. And
yeah, I appreciate it, Janet. Like, yeah, we should definitely talk more. And I think also just like there's not a lot of like popular education about what organizing is. And so like people sort of like default to putting a lot of different kinds of really important activity under the banner of activism. And I think like, yeah, we could just like press into that more.
Yeah. Well,
look,
it's always like
and why people get into organizing too. Yeah.
Totally.
Why?
Or activism.
You know, or talk about social practice in art schools, social practice and how problematic that is. Well, Danny, here we are.
Thank you all.
Here we are.
Yes.
It's time.
It's time. It's time. Yes.
On 3.
On 3. On Ready? 3.
1, 2, 3. So, Benjamin, thank you so much for coming today to conclude our episode today, which is not a conclusion because we'll definitely be talking to you again soon. But in your utopia, there would be
care for everyone. No, nothing disposed of, like everything being used to sustain life. And I think like people think of survival as like too base, but I think like there's a kind of like survival that is thriving, you know, like, and I think just everyone taking care of everyone, laboring together in a way that is not work to take care.
Yes. With our purple unicorns behind us on screen now, folks, in the glorious cosmos.
In the magicalness of whatever we call this. It might not be artivism, I don't know. But yeah, Ben, where can people find you?
Personally, I have this like hilarious URL that is jointhebenjam.org, which might change in the future. My social media is simply my initials. So it's B_LTS_ on Instagram and Twitter. And then this project that we've been talking about or using as a base for the conversation is at weareholdingthis.org.
Yeah, where people can check out the zines, where they can purchase them and sponsor them if they are interested.
Yeah, or subscribe and you'll automatically be mailed stuff as it comes out. We're working on issues 3 and 4 of the zine right now, hoping for a release of the next one next month. So if you subscribe now, you'd get the prior 2 issues and a 3rd one coming along the way.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfecto.
Yes. Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
y'all.
so much.
I appreciate it.
I hope your eye feels better.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Thanks for tuning in to Reflect, Recalibrate. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way we know that you love us. But for real, that way you always know when to reflect, recalibrate. Also, don't forget to look in the notes to this episode for information on the apparel that we're wearing, the resources that we give in the episode, as well as a PayPal link in case you decide to send us some love. It's always super duper appreciated. The more love that we can get, then the more resources we're able to provide you all. Thanks again. Text my boss real quick, let her know I'm running a little late.
Oh no, sorry. I don't know, Danny. I don't know if we're gonna be able to do half an hour shows because it'd just be too good.
It's too hard. It's too hard.
Too good. Like it's
But
like
that's
so much.
What's good about aiming for 30 is that we get to 48.
like,
Because our last episode was like 55. I was like, perfect.
I was like, oh.
Thanks, y'all. Just had to let somebody in.
Oh no, it's all
No
good.
worries.
Okay, get back to your interview days. So I'm just kidding.
Yeah, let me know when we're
all right, we're ready.